Have you ever had a moment where a perfectly ordinary, mundane day is just violently derailed by a smell?
Oh, yeah. Completely derailed.
Like you could be walking down the aisle of a hardware store, maybe thinking about your grocery list or a work email.
Just completely lost in the horizontal momentum of your day. Yeah.
Exactly. And suddenly you catch the scent of, I don't know, a very specific brand of industrial floor wax.
Or maybe walking through a park after a rainstorm, and it's that hyper-specific mix of damp earth and crushed pine needles.
Yes, exactly that. And in a fraction of a millisecond, your brain doesn't just consciously pull up a memory of a past event.
No, it's not a cognitive recall at all.
Right. Your entire physical body is violently transported back to your elementary school hallway or, a childhood summer camp that you hadn't consciously thought about in 30 years.
Because you don't just remember it, you inhabit it.
You inhabit it. Your pulse physically changes. Your breathing shifts. The tension in your shoulders just drops or spikes. For a brief, incredibly disorienting second, you are fundamentally not the adult standing in that hardware store.
You are entirely somewhere else.
Right, you're trapped in this somatic echo that completely bypassed all of your logic and reasoning.
It's a very visceral phenomenon. I mean, the scent hits the olfactory bulb, and because of the way our brains are wired, that signal doesn't get routed through the cognitive, analytical sensors first.
It doesn't go to the filing cabinet.
No, it shoots straight into the limbic system, the amygdala and the hippocampus. It's a literal ambush.
An ambush. I love that word for it. It's a deeply universal human experience, that sudden ambush of sensory memory.
It is.
But today, we are going to look at what happens when that universal experience isn't just a fleeting wave of nostalgia.
Right. What happens when it's something much heavier?
Exactly. What happens when that sudden sensory trigger unlocks a vault containing an entire displaced universe? And it completely shatters the foundation of a life you've spent decades meticulously building.
That is the core question.
If you've ever watched the 2016 hit film Lion, you probably walked out of the theater feeling uplifted. You probably cried.
Most people did. It was designed for that exact reaction.
But what if we told you that you might have actually been cheering for the exact moment the main character's life fell apart?
Which is a wild paradigm shift for most viewers.
It really is. Today, we are looking at the inciting incident of a story you probably think you already know. We're looking at a grown, highly successful man freezing in a modern kitchen over a plate of Indian sweets called jalebi.
It is such a powerful, grounded image to start with. I mean, it moves us completely away from abstract theory.
Right.
And it drops us right into the undeniable reality of the human nervous system. That moment with the jalebi is the pivotal turning point in Lion.
It's the catalyst.
Yeah, but to really understand what's happening, we have to look past the way the movie frames it. We have to look at the systemic reality beneath the Hollywood gloss.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. The challenge we have for you, listening right now, is to look past that glossy, award-winning framing.
To go deeper.
Right. We are going to explore the profound, often deliberately hidden realities of the adult adoptee experience.
And we have incredible source material to guide us.
We do. We are doing this by looking at a brilliant, rigorous, and frankly paradigm-shifting critical essay and accompanying report. It's titled Beyond the Jalebi: The Adoptee Inside Garth Davis's Lion.
It's a phenomenal piece of work.
The central paradox that this essay presents, and this is the hook that absolutely fascinated me, is the argument that there are actually two entirely different films playing simultaneously inside Lion.
Yes, the dual narrative architecture of the film. It's a brilliant framing by the author.
What does that mean exactly? Two films in one?
Well, what's fascinating here is how effectively the essay separates these embedded films. The first film is the one that was marketed to the public.
The one on the poster.
Exactly. It is the highly visible, commercially viable tearjerker. It's a triumphant story about the connective power of modern technology, specifically Google Earth.
Right, the tech saves the day angle.
Yeah, and the comforting idea that love ultimately conquers all geographical and historical obstacles. It's the film that won awards and made audiences weep these massive cathartic tears.
Right, it's the movie with the sweeping orchestral score, the beautiful drone shots of the Tasmanian coastline, and that perfect golden hour lighting.
That feels good.
It feels resolved. But then the essay points out that there's this second film hidden inside it.
And this second film is entirely subversive. I mean, it operates almost like a diagnostic report on systemic trauma.
A diagnostic report. I like that.
Yeah, and a report on the foundational fallacies of the adoption industry itself. It is an unflinching portrayal of what actually happens when an adoptive environment collides with the neurobiological reality of early childhood rupture.
Which is heavy. It's so heavy.
It is. But before we get into the mechanics of that collision, we really need to establish a specific framework for our conversation today, because the source text demands it.
Yes, let's lay the ground rules.
We are going to utilize what the author refers to as honest adoption language.
That feels incredibly important to clarify right at the top. What exactly does honest adoption language mean for how we are going to talk about this today?
It means we are fundamentally shifting the lens. Traditionally, society views an adoptee's struggles through a pathologizing model.
A medical model, basically.
Right. If an adopted child struggles, it's viewed as an individual clinical failure, a behavioral issue, or a character defect that needs to be, quote-unquote, fixed by the adoptive family or by a therapist.
It's the child's problem to solve.
Exactly. But honest adoption language completely rejects that. Instead, we treat the adoptee's lived embodied experience as absolute, undisputed expertise.
Their body is the truth.
Yes. The tone of the essay, and our tone today, is what the author describes as post-tragic.
Post-tragic. I love that phrase. It implies that we acknowledge the tragedy occurred, but we aren't wallowing in it.
Right.
And we aren't slapping a happy face sticker over it either.
Precisely. It is never despairing, but it is never falsely upbeat. It requires us to be clear-eyed about systemic harm.
No toxic positivity today.
None. We are going to focus on structural, neurological realities rather than leaning into the comfortable sentimentality that usually surrounds discussions of adoption in popular culture.
We have to look at the mechanics of what is actually happening inside the body.
Right, the institutional forces meeting the nervous system.
So let's dive straight into those mechanics. Let's look at the neurobiological reality of that jalebi scene.
Okay, let's set the scene.
Saru is at a dinner party with friends in Australia. He is a young, successful adult. He wanders into the kitchen, and there, sitting on the counter, is a plate of jalebi.
That bright orange deep-fried batter.
Right, soaked in sugar syrup. He smells it, he sees it, and he completely freezes.
His whole body locks up.
In the Hollywood version of this story, how is the audience supposed to interpret this exact moment?
Well, in the mainstream cinematic narrative, the jalebi functions essentially as a plot device.
Like a smoking gun.
Yeah, it's the cinematic equivalent of a detective finding a matchbook from a mysterious bar at a crime scene. It sets him on a quest.
Right.
The film treats it as a narrative clue, a catalyst for a geographic mystery that he will subsequently solve using his laptop and a broadband connection. It propels the external action of the story forward.
But the essay completely rejects that superficial reading. It goes much, much deeper into what is physically happening to his brain in that kitchen.
It does, and it uses two critical clinical concepts from the report to explain it: somatic anchors and embodied memory.
Somatic anchors.
Yeah. If we connect this to the bigger picture of trauma studies, we know that early, profound rupture, especially pre-linguistic trauma,
Meaning trauma that happens before a child has the vocabulary to articulate their experience.
exactly. That kind of trauma is not stored in the brain as a linear cognitive narrative.
Right.
A 5-year-old child experiencing displacement, losing his family, ending up on the streets of Calcutta.
Right.
They don't write a coherent diary entry in their mind saying, today I was separated from my mother and I feel immense sorrow.
Because the brain literally hasn't developed the filing system for that kind of declarative memory yet. The prefrontal cortex, the part that handles logic and chronological storytelling, it just isn't fully online or running the show.
Exactly. It's not equipped for that yet.
Yeah.
So where does that experience go? The profound threat, the terror, the rupture.
It has to go somewhere.
It is locked directly into the limbic system. That's the older, more primal part of the brain that manages survival.
The animal brain.
Right. The trauma is encoded not in words, but in sensory fragments. It is embedded in the taste of a specific food.
Like the jalebi.
Yes. Or the olfactory signature of a particular street, the kinesthetic sensation of a certain temperature or physical touch.
Just raw data.
Raw, unprocessed sensory data. These fragments become somatic anchors. They are physical archives of a past that the cognitive mind has completely walled off in order to survive the present.
Walled off just to function day to day. So when Saru smells the jalebi in that Australian kitchen, it's not that he's merely remembering a snack he used to like as a kid. The essay suggests he isn't arriving at this memory voluntarily at all.
Not at all. He is being ambushed by it. The sensory trigger of the smell and the sight of the jalebi completely bypasses all of his cognitive defenses.
It just slices right through.
It sneaks right past the intellectual firewalls he has built over 20 years. And what happens when this pre-linguistic memory is triggered is what the text describes as a catastrophic destabilization.
Catastrophic destabilization.
Yes, this is a phenomenon known clinically as adoption revelation.
That sounds so violent. A catastrophic destabilization. It's a far cry from the warm, fuzzy wave of nostalgia that the movie's score tries to imply is happening.
Oh, it is a psychological earthquake. The essay articulates this beautifully by contrasting his horizontally constructed adult identity with his vertical, unmourned truth.
Horizontal versus vertical. Break that down for me.
Think about Saru up until that exact moment in the kitchen. He has spent decades constructing a horizontal identity in Australia. He has a career path, an Australian accent, a romantic partner, social fluency.
He's moving forward on a timeline.
Right. He has built a life moving forward in time horizontally, day by day, year by year. But the jalebi drops a vertical plumb line straight down through all those carefully constructed layers.
Wow.
It instantly connects him to the raw, completely unmourned truth of his biological origins and the initial unresolved trauma of his displacement.
The horizontal identity built over time, subtly pierced by the vertical truth of origin. That is such a stunning physical way to visualize it.
It's terrifying when you really think about the mechanics of it.
It is. Listening to you explain how the nervous system holds onto these somatic angers with an absolute iron grip, all I can picture is a computer operating system.
Okay, how so?
Well, the Hollywood narrative, the cultural myth we all just blindly buy into, assumes that adoption takes a traumatized child, wipes the hard drive completely clean, and simply installs a brand new operating system.
A nice, stable, middle-class Australian OS.
Exactly. And look, the computer boots up, it runs the programs, it seems fine, it gets good grades, it speaks English.
Right.
But this essay is arguing that the original code, the trauma, the primal loss, was never actually deleted. It is still running silently in the background, taking up massive amounts of processing power.
I see where you're going with this.
And the jalebi was essentially a random keystroke that bypassed all the new security firewalls and violently brought the original chaotic code right back to the main screen, crashing the new operating system in the process.
I like the direction of that analogy, but I would actually push back on it just a little bit to make it more clinically precise.
Okay, push back.
The computer analogy implies that a hard drive can be wiped clean if you just have the right software.
Right.
But the human nervous system doesn't have a delete function.
It just doesn't exist.
No, it only has an overwrite function, and a highly imperfect one at that. The blank slate myth, this idea that you can just wipe the hard drive by changing the environment, is a profound misunderstanding of human neurobiology.
The environment doesn't erase the past.
Right. The new operating system doesn't erase the old one. It merely masks it. And that masking requires a tremendous ongoing exertion of metabolic and psychological energy.
So the whole concept of a fresh start, at least neurologically speaking, is a biological myth.
Completely. And this breakdown of the blank slate myth is exactly what the author explores when we look at the second major narrative arc in the film.
The brothers.
Yes. If you want to understand the limits of the wiped hard drive theory, you have to look at the profound contrast between how the two adopted brothers, Saru and Mantosh, navigate their new lives in Tasmania.
This is where the story gets really complicated for the audience, because we have two brothers who arrive into the exact same loving, well-resourced home.
Same adoptive parents, the Brierleys.
Right. They are given the same opportunities, the same environment, the same theoretical second chance. On paper, the variables are identical.
Identical variables, but the film presents us with starkly different outcomes. Saru, as we've discussed, appears to thrive.
He's the model citizen.
He is. He is quick to acquire English. He excels academically. He navigates social situations with ease. He goes to college. To the outside world, and certainly to the adoption industry's preferred narrative, Saru is the ultimate proof that the intervention worked.
He is the shining success story, the brochure.
He is the brochure, but then there's Mantosh.
And Mantosh's story is the one that makes everyone in the audience shift uncomfortably in their seats.
Because Mantosh struggles profoundly from the very moment he arrives. He exhibits severe dysregulation. We see him struggling with self-harm. He is consumed by unpredictable rage. He has profound social alienation.
He just can't settle into the horizontal identity.
No. And ultimately, as an adult, he estranges himself from the family entirely. The film, operating in its commercial Hollywood mode, tends to treat Mantosh's unraveling almost as background noise to Saru's hero quest.
Like a foil.
Exactly. It frames them as two boys with simply different temperaments, or implies that perhaps Mantosh was just inherently damaged by his time before adoption in a way Saru somehow wasn't.
And here is where the essay just completely deconstructs that cultural assumption. It takes aim at a concept called environmental determinism.
That's the institutional core of the issue.
Right. I know that's a dense term, environmental determinism, but what does it actually mean in the context of how we view these two brothers?
Environmental determinism, specifically in the context of the adoption industry, is the deeply entrenched assumption that providing a safe middle-class home and abundant parental love is a sufficient intervention to completely rewire a child's nervous system.
Love cures all.
Right. It's the belief that the external environment exclusively determines the internal reality. The industry rhetoric posits that if you just provide enough warmth, good food, a nice bedroom, and educational resources, you can cure a nervous system that was fundamentally organized around threat and profound betrayal during its most critical developmental window.
So, if environmental determinism is true, both boys should have ended up exactly like Saru because they both got the nice house and the loving parents.
That's the logical conclusion of that theory, yes.
The fact that Mantosh didn't is usually blamed on Mantosh. People say, well, he just couldn't accept the love or he was a bad seed.
Exactly. It places the systemic failure squarely on the individual child's inability to conform to the environment.
It blames the victim.
It does. But the essay argues that Saru and Mantosh do not represent different temperaments, and they certainly don't represent different levels of love received from their adoptive parents.
So what are they representing?
What's fascinating here is the paradigm shift the author demands from the reader. The essay insists that Saru and Mantosh are not experiencing different outcomes based on their character. They are representing two radically different survival strategies in response to the exact same foundational wound.
Okay, this is a massive shift. Two different survival strategies for the same wound. Let's break down the mechanics of that. The report assigns specific clinical terms to each brother to explain this difference. Let's start with Saru.
The golden child.
A success story. What is actually happening underneath his academic and social fluency?
The report diagnoses Saru's trajectory using the terms adaptive dissociation and hyperassimilation.
Adaptive dissociation.
This is absolutely critical to understand. Saru's success is not organic healing. It is a meticulous, highly resource-intensive performance of psychological wholeness.
So performance.
Yes. Saru had the specific neurobiological capacity to split his consciousness. He sequestered his trauma, burying it deep underground, in order to rapidly assimilate to the demands of his new environment.
He built a character to play.
He built a flawless performance of the happy, adjusted son to secure his physical and relational safety within the adoptive family. And importantly, he did this to shield his adoptive parents from the unbearable reality of his internal fragmentation.
Wait, I really want to make sure I am grasping this because it challenges everything we are taught about resilience. You're saying that Saru's absolute fluency in his new life, his good grades, his easy smile, his successful career, that wasn't proof that the trauma was gone.
No, it was not.
It was actually just a highly effective, incredibly exhausting disguise.
Yes, it was a primary defense mechanism. The trauma was rendered invisible to the outside world, not eradicated. It was kept clean and linear only because he possessed the dissociative strength to keep it completely repressed.
That sounds exhausting.
It takes a massive metabolic toll. He walled it off so effectively that even he didn't realize it was there. Until, of course, the jalebi broke the dam.
Okay, so if Saru is utilizing adaptive dissociation, what is the clinical reality for Mantosh? Why couldn't he just build the same disguise?
Mantosh is experiencing what the text identifies as complex developmental trauma. The crucial difference is that Mantosh simply lacks the neurobiological scaffolding to suppress his distress.
You can't build the wall.
He does not have the capacity to perform wholeness. The profound rupture he experienced, the institutionalization, the repeated relational betrayals, the terror, didn't have anywhere quiet to go inside him.
It couldn't be sequestered.
Right. He couldn't dissociate from it.
Yeah.
So, as the essay notes, it emerges physically. It comes out through his skin, his fists, his refusal to assimilate, his screaming fits.
His body is doing the talking.
His nervous system is literally sounding the alarm because it cannot contain the threat.
Imagine two houses that have both been built on fundamentally cracked, shifting foundations. They both have the exact same catastrophic structural flaw.
Okay.
Now, Saru's house, whoever lives there, has put on a perfect glossy coat of paint. The landscaping is immaculate, the windows are shining. Everyone who drives by points and says, wow, what a beautiful structurally sound house.
They buy the illusion.
And they believe that right up until the day it suddenly collapses into a sinkhole 20 years later.
Because the structural integrity was always compromised. The paint job was just holding the visual narrative together.
Right. Now, look at Mantosh's house next door. Mantosh's house has the roof actively caving in from day one. The windows are shattered, the walls are visibly buckling.
It's an undeniable crisis.
It is obvious to everyone who walks by that the house is in severe distress. Society praises the first house and condemns the second. We call the first house a success and the second house a tragedy or a failure.
Right, we moralize it.
But this essay is pointing out that they both have the exact same foundational fracture. One is just better at hiding it, an immense energetic cost.
I think that captures the dynamic perfectly. And Mantosh becomes the living, undeniable critique of the expectation that an adopted child should be able to simply adapt seamlessly to a new environment.
He's the proof that the blank slate is a lie.
Exactly. His nervous system refuses to lie. It refuses to perform. But if we connect this to the bigger systemic picture, we have to ask a really difficult question.
Why perform at all?
Right. Why did Saru feel so intensely compelled to maintain that flawless paint job? Why did he feel he had to build that disguise?
It couldn't have been random.
It wasn't. This performance of wholeness isn't just a random coping mechanism he chose in a vacuum. It is deeply, inextricably connected to the unspoken, instrumental dynamics of the adoptive herm itself.
The environment demanded it.
Yes. Which brings us to a very quiet but absolutely devastating scene in the film between adult Saru and his adoptive mother, Sue.
This part of the essay really shifted my entire perspective. We are focusing on a critical scene in the second act. Saru is an adult, and he is consumed by guilt because he has been secretly searching for his biological mother on Google Earth.
He feels like he's betraying them.
He feels like he's betraying his adoptive parents by even looking. He feels like he's being ungrateful. So he goes to his adoptive mother, Sue, and he apologizes.
He essentially apologizes for not being the blank slate that he assumes she must have wanted when she adopted them.
It's a moment of profound vulnerability. Saru is essentially confessing that his performance is cracking.
The paint is peeling.
Yeah. And Sue's response is delivered with incredible warmth and tenderness, played brilliantly by Nicole Kidman. The cinematic framing tells us this is a moment of pure, unconditional maternal love.
The music tells us how to feel.
But the essay asks us to step out of the emotional manipulation of the score and listen very closely to the actual, literal content of what she says, because it is an astonishing revelation.
It really is.
Sue tells Saru that she didn't adopt because she was infertile or because she and her husband couldn't have biological children. She reveals that they actively chose to adopt because she believed that bringing more biological children into an already overpopulated, suffering world was morally wrong.
It was an ethical stance.
She wanted, instead, to save children who already existed in distress.
On the surface, if you are just watching the movie casually, that sounds incredibly noble. The film frames it as the ultimate expression of altruism.
Look at this selfless woman.
Right. Look at her choosing to save the suffering rather than propagate her own genetics. But the expert analysis in this report unpacks the incredibly heavy, complicated implications of that scene. It's not just a sweet mother-son moment.
It requires a rigorous deconstruction.
It does. The essay introduces the concept of the child as a moral instrument. This is what the author terms instrumental altruism.
Instrumental altruism.
Let's look at the actual transaction happening beneath the tenderness of that scene. The 5-year-old boy, Saru, was not brought into that house simply to be a child, to be loved for his own intrinsic sake.
He had a job to do.
He was brought into the family system to complete someone else's ethical accounting. He was imported to validate a pre-existing moral and ideological project, a saviorist project.
Meaning, Sue had a moral thesis about the state of the world, and Saru was essentially the proof of concept.
Precisely. And from a critical adoptee studies perspective, this places an immense, crushing, and largely invisible burden upon the child.
I can imagine.
The adoptee is implicitly tasked with justifying the adoption itself. And how do they justify it? Through their successful adjustment. Through their happiness.
I'm struggling to understand how a 5-year-old consciously decides to perform gratitude. Isn't that too complex a manipulation for a child's brain?
It's a very fair question.
Nobody sits a 5-year-old down at the kitchen table and hands them a legally binding contract that says, you must now prove my moral goodness to the world by being happy and getting good grades. How does a child actually pick up on that?
It's important to clarify that it's rarely a conscious, calculated decision on the child's part, nor is it usually a malicious demand on the parent's part. It's not that Sue is twirling her mustache, demanding a performance.
Right.
It's about the neurobiology of attachment and survival. Children are exceptionally, almost supernaturally attuned to the emotional needs and unspoken requirements of their caregivers.
Their survival depends on it.
Their literal physical survival depends on keeping those caregivers attached to them. This is especially true for children whose survival has already been threatened by a primary separation.
They've already lost one set of parents.
Exactly. So they walk into the new home hypervigilant, they scan the environment. What do these giants need me to be so they don't abandon me like the last ones did?
Oh, wow.
They sense the weight of the parent-savior narrative. They sense that their sadness makes the parents anxious or disappointed. This dynamic creates what the essay calls performative gratitude, as an absolute condition of belonging.
Performative gratitude. So Saru's entire life, the good grades, the assimilation, the suppression of his trauma, it all becomes a form of unspoken, lifelong labor.
It is absolute labor.
He is working tirelessly to prove that his mother's ethical arithmetic was correct, that she made a good investment in saving him.
Yes. His compliance is survival-driven. He becomes the mirror reflecting his adoptive parents' benevolence back to them. And if we look back at Mantosh through this specific lens, his unraveling takes on a whole new dimension.
Because he couldn't do the job.
Mantosh's collapse isn't just about his unintegrated trauma. It is what happens when a child physically and neurologically cannot perform that required labor. Mantosh represents the structural failure of the family system to accommodate a child who could not fulfill the performative requirements of gratitude.
He couldn't be the shining proof.
He couldn't be the shining proof of the Savior Project, and that inability alienates him further, creating a vicious cycle of shame and rage.
It's like being recruited completely out of the blue for a high-pressure corporate job.
Okay, I like this.
You never applied for it, you didn't seek it out, you were just picked up off the street and placed at the desk. And slowly you realize that the CEO staked their entire professional reputation, their entire moral standing on hiring you.
Right.
Your only way to keep a roof over your head, your only way to maintain your position in the company is to win Employee of the Month every single month, flawlessly, without ever complaining about the stress. Just to prove to everyone that the CEO made a brilliant visionary hire.
That translates the emotional stakes very well. The pressure is existential. You are not allowed to simply be. You must continually justify your presence.
It's conditional love masquerading as unconditional love.
Yes. And the essay brilliantly connects this individual domestic dynamic, this pressure inside the Brierley home, to the broader language used by the adoption industry itself.
The systemic level.
Right. The author critiques what is known as respectful adoption language. This is the industry standard that insists on calling the adopted child a gift or a blessing, or focusing endlessly on how lucky the child is to have been saved.
I've always heard that language used as a positive thing. People say, oh, what a blessing that you found each other. What is the essay's problem with that language? It sounds supportive.
Well, the author argues that this framing is actually a highly sophisticated grief suppressor.
A grief suppressor.
It is designed to make the separated child carry the entire emotional cost of the adult's decisions. By labeling the child a gift, the system asks the child to view a profound rupture, the loss of their original family, their language, their culture, and their identity as their own good fortune.
That's incredibly twisted when you phrase it that way.
It sanitizes a systemic transfer of a human being from one set of circumstances to another, and it demands that the subject of that transfer feel exclusively lucky about it.
It effectively outlaws their grief. I mean, if you are a blessing, how can you be devastated? You can't be devastated and a blessing at the same time. You have to smile and just be the blessing.
Exactly. It mandates the performative gratitude we just discussed. And what's crucial to understand is that this immense pressure to maintain the savior narrative isn't just happening inside individual private homes.
It's everywhere.
It is being enforced, amplified, and monetized at a macro level by the very industry that produced the film Lion in the first place.
Which brings us to the broader systemic critique. The essay pans the camera back from the family dynamic and looks at the institutional forces at play.
The Hollywood machine.
Yes. It starts by looking at the real-world press tour for the movie, specifically focusing on Nicole Kidman, who, as we mentioned, played Sue Brierley.
Right. The essay points out a stark contrast between the harrowing neurobiological realities depicted in the film and the way the film was discussed by its stars in the media.
They weren't talking about trauma on the red carpet.
Not at all. During the press cycle, Kidman's narrative focused almost entirely on the comfortable, universally palatable themes of unconditional love and the power of mothers.
The essay notes that when an interviewer actually confronted her with the raw facts of what happened to the real 5-year-old Saru before he ever reached Australia, the profound trauma of his displacement and the terror of being lost in Calcutta, she expressed disbelief.
She did.
She said it seemed almost impossible to believe any of it had actually happened.
And the author is very careful to state that this isn't a malicious reaction, nor is it uniquely a personal failing of Nicole Kidman. It is a genuine reaction, but it is a highly instructive one.
It tells us something about society.
It reveals the exact boundary where the mainstream culture's imagination regarding adoption simply stops. The culture is perfectly content to marvel at the wonder, the love, the miracle of the happy ending.
But they don't want the grit.
They have zero appetite for grappling with the structural questions. What does a ruptured nervous system actually look like? What is the daily grinding cost of performative gratitude?
The culture wants the feeling, not the analysis.
Precisely. As the essay states, the performance gets to live entirely inside the feeling, and the feeling stands in for the rigorous analysis that the press cycle actively avoids.
It's easier to just feel good.
And this pivots into a much broader systemic critique of Hollywood itself. The author highlights a crucial, often overlooked fact. Hollywood is not just an industry that makes sentimental movies about adoption. Hollywood is, demographically, one of the highest profile adopting classes on Earth.
That is a staggering realization when you really think about it. We are talking about a highly concentrated population of enormously wealthy, enormously connected, highly visible people who choose to adopt at a rate that dramatically influences public perception.
They possess unparalleled access to lawmakers, global media platforms, and massive philanthropic capital. And the historical record is very clear on how that systemic leverage has been utilized.
How has it been utilized?
Well, for decades, celebrity adoption has functioned as a massive, largely unquestioned public relations engine for the adoption industry as a whole. Media coverage is almost uniformly positive, focusing on the benevolence of the adoptive parents and entirely erasing the complex, often traumatic realities of the adoptee.
The essay uses a very specific, documented example of this leverage in action, looking at Deborah Lee Furness, who is married to Hugh Jackman, and her organization Adopt Change in Australia.
Yes, that's a key example in the text.
How does the author analyze her advocacy? Because on the surface, she is heralded as a massive champion for vulnerable children.
Furness is often heralded as a champion of adoption reform. But the essay asks us to look very closely at what she is reforming. Her advocacy is explicitly focused on the front end of the process.
The front end meaning the acquisition.
It is centered on making adoption faster and easier for prospective parents. Specifically, she has advocated for loosening the processes by which biological parental rights are terminated, modeling her preferred system on the United States, which is where she adopted her own children.
So she wants to speed up the process of severing the legal tie to the biological family so the child can be acquired faster.
Yes.
And how does the adult adoptee community, the people who actually have the lived expertise of this system, view this kind of front-end advocacy?
The essay notes that within the adoptee community, this type of advocacy draws deep criticism. Adult adoptees interpret the push to loosen the termination of parental rights not as a victory for children, but as a mechanism for moving children out of struggling, under-resourced families and into wealthier families much faster.
It's a pipeline.
It is advocacy for the adopting class, not the adopted person. It focuses entirely on supply.
This is the critical distinction between front-end advocacy and back-end reality. What is the back-end reality that adult adoptees are actually fighting for? If the celebrities are fighting for faster acquisition, what are the adoptees fighting for?
While high-profile advocates spend their immense leverage making it easier to acquire children, adult adoptees have been engaged in a grueling, decades-long, entirely unglamorous fight for basic human rights.
Like what?
The primary battleground is the right to access their own original, unaltered birth certificates.
Their own birth certificate?
Yes. In many jurisdictions, including large parts of the U.S. system that Furness praises, these records are permanently sealed by the state upon adoption.
Sealed permanently.
The adoptee is legally barred from knowing their own true name, their biological parentage, and their genetic medical history. The state literally falsifies a new birth certificate, listing the adoptive parents as if they gave birth to the child.
Wait, really? The state issues a document that is biologically untrue, and the adult adoptee isn't legally allowed to see the original. Why was that ever the standard?
Historically, it was framed as a way to protect the child from the stigma of illegitimacy. But practically, it functioned to protect the adoptive parent's claim to the child and shield the biological parent's identity.
It was about adult comfort.
It was a system built entirely around adult comfort.
Yeah.
And the fight to unseal these records is fierce. Adoptees argue it's a fundamental human right to know who you are and where you come from.
So we have incredibly wealthy, connected people rewriting the laws to make acquiring children easier, but completely ignoring those exact same children when they grow up and ask the state for their own birth records.
That is the reality.
That is an astonishing double standard. It's like a billionaire lobbying the government, spending millions of dollars to build a massive state-of-the-art high-speed highway solely designed to bring people into a specific city.
Okay, the highway analogy.
But then that same billionaire aggressively refuses to fund any exit ramps, any street signs, or any maps for those people once they are trapped inside the city limits. They ensure the intake is seamless, but they completely abandon the people once they are in the system trying to navigate their own lives.
That is exactly it. The focus is entirely on the acquisition, the arrival. There is no institutional interest in the long-term navigation.
Because the long-term navigation is messy.
And this institutional reflex, this overwhelming desire to focus on the arrival and avoid the complex reality of what comes after, is exactly why the film Lion ends at the precise narrative moment that it does. The movie is a perfect reflection of this cultural blind spot.
Let's break down the closing moments of the film, because the essay argues that the ending is actually the most profound critique of the whole system.
The ending is very revealing.
We get the tearful walk into the dusty village. We get the intensely emotional embrace with the biological mother he hasn't seen in 25 years. The music swells.
The peak emotional payoff.
Right. We get the tidy, narratively satisfying revelation that he had been mispronouncing his own name, and that Saru actually means lion. The screen fades to black, the credits roll, and the audience leaves the theater with a massive cathartic exhale. The mystery is solved. The circle is closed.
It is a masterful piece of emotional filmmaking. But the expert report relies on adult adoptee studies to completely deconstruct this ending. The author refers to this ending as an act of narrative evacuation.
Narrative evacuation, meaning the movie actively flees the scene right when the real story is starting.
Exactly. The movie evacuates the premises because the reality is too complex for a three-act structure. For the adult adoptee, the physical reunion is never a finish line.
It's not the end.
It is not the end of the story. It is a profound inception. It is the beginning of a vastly more complicated reality. The text identifies what it calls the psychosocial integration gap.
The psychosocial integration gap.
That's the massive, unfilmed chasm of reality that occurs the exact second the cameras turn off and the credits stop rolling.
The essay breaks this psychosocial integration gap down into three distinct, agonizing realities. Let's explore each of them, because this is the stuff the mainstream culture completely ignores.
Yes, let's go through them.
Number one, the linguistic and cultural chasm.
Think about the practical reality of that embrace in the village. Saru is now a fully westernized adult. He thinks, drives, and communicates entirely in English.
He's Australian.
Right. His biological mother is a rural, monolingual Indian woman. The emotional intensity of the initial reunion can transcend language for a few hours.
The tears, the hugging, the sheer shock of it, that doesn't require words.
But what happens on day 2, day 20? The essay points out the structural impossibility of deep, nuanced relational reciprocity when you do not share a language, a cultural context, or a worldview.
How do you even have a conversation?
You don't really. How do you explain the complexities of your adult life, your career in Australia, your relationship with your adoptive parents, to a mother who cannot understand your words?
You can't ask her about the day you were born.
The linguistic barrier is a daily, painful reminder of the rupture. You found her, but you cannot speak to her.
It's devastating. The geography is solved, but the connection is still severed. Okay, number 2 in the integration gap, the dual belonging paradox.
This is the permanent ontological state of the reunited adoptee. You now belong to two entirely irreconcilable worlds.
Two worlds.
You have your adoptive family and your constructed life in Australia, and you have your biological family and your roots in India. Because these worlds are so vastly different, you are perpetually caught between them.
The paradox being?
The tragic paradox is that by belonging to both, you fully belong to neither. You are a permanent outsider in your adoptive culture, due to your origins and your DNA.
You don't look like them.
And you are a permanent outsider in your culture of origin, due to your westernized upbringing and lack of language. It is a state of perpetual liminality. You are always a ghost in one of the rooms.
A permanent state of exile, even when you are technically home.
Yes.
And finally, number 3, perhaps the most heartbreaking, the irreversibility of lost time.
The culture treats finding the geographical coordinates, using Google Earth to find the village, as if it solves the equation.
Like finding the X on the map fixes everything.
But the essay points out a harsh, immovable truth. Finding a geographical location does not hand back time. It does not retroactively repair the decades of developmental years spent apart.
It doesn't give you your childhood back.
The mother in the village did not get to watch him grow up. He did not get to know her through his formative years. You can buy a plane ticket and stitch the geography back together, but you cannot stitch a fractured timeline back together.
Time travel isn't real.
The years are simply gone, and no amount of reunion changes that fact. The grief of the reunion is realizing exactly what was stolen.
So, what does this all mean for the viewer? When we sit in that theater, weeping tears of joy as the credits roll, what are we actually doing?
What is our role in that moment?
The essay suggests we are being trained by the culture to applaud at the exact moment the adoptee's life gets exponentially more difficult and complex.
We applaud because the unresolved ambivalence of what comes after the hug does not fit a commercial narrative. It doesn't sell tickets.
It's a bummer.
The mainstream culture cannot stomach the prolonged, unglamorous reality of post-reunion life, so it simply cuts to black. We prefer the fantasy of a solved puzzle over the reality of a fractured life.
Ending the movie at the reunion is like ending a movie about a perilous Apollo space mission the exact second the astronaut's lunar lander touches down on a new, uncharted planet.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
You show the landing gear hit the dirt, the astronauts smile, you cut to black, and you roll the credits. You completely ignore the fact that the actual hard part is just beginning.
They're on the surface now.
They now have to figure out how to breathe the alien atmosphere, how to communicate with base camp, how to source water, and how to survive in an entirely unknown environment with absolutely no instruction manual. The landing isn't the end of the mission, it's the start of the true test.
It is an alien landscape with no manual. And this is precisely why the author concludes that the film Lion, despite all its sentimental intentions, actually acts as a perfect subtextual diagnostic tool for understanding the adoption industry's profound limitations.
It accidentally tells the truth.
It accidentally reveals everything it is trying to hide. By showing us the sheer force of the jalebi trigger, by showing us Mantosh's collapse, by showing us Sue's savior complex, and by fleeing the scene the moment the reunion occurs, the film maps out the exact contours of the adoptee's impossible position.
It is an incredibly heavy, profound rereading of a story we all thought we knew.
It forces you to rethink everything.
We started by moving away from the Hollywood imagery and looking at the visceral neurobiological trigger of a jalebi, how somatic memory bypasses cognitive firewalls and ambushes the adoptee with an unmourned past.
The limbic system taking over.
We saw how environmental determinism fails, and how Saru and Mantosh were just executing different survival strategies in response to the exact same foundational wound.
We unpacked the heavy, invisible burden of instrumental altruism and performative gratitude, looking at how the adoptive family system can implicitly demand that the child act as moral proof of a savior's project.
Employee of the month.
Exactly. We zoomed out to examine the Hollywood machine itself, exposing how massive systemic leverage is spent on the front-end acquisition of children while ignoring the back-end rights of adult adoptees.
The sealed records.
And finally, we deconstructed the cinematic ending, revealing that a geographical reunion is an inception, not a resolution.
The expert who wrote this essay leaves the listener with a final empowering paradigm shift, a provocative thought to take with you.
The branches of the tree.
The author states that the performance of assimilation Saru's path and the collapse into rage Mantosh's path are not opposite fates. They are not character flaws or measures of a family's love. They are simply branches of the exact same tree of trauma.
And the most important takeaway is what true repair actually requires.
What does it require?
The text makes it clear. True repair requires the complete abandonment of the idea that a child owes a family or society proof that the adoption worked.
No more performative gratitude.
The way forward is not found in forced gratitude or hyper-assimilation. The way forward is built by the adoptee, on purpose, with eyes wide open to the structural realities of what actually happened to them.
I urge everyone listening to deeply rethink the origin stories and the adoption narratives you consume in the media. When you see the tearful reunion, ask yourself what happens the next day.
Look past the poster.
To truly grasp this post-tragic framework, you have to read the source material. I point you directly to the full essay, Beyond the Jalebi, which is available on Substack. It is a brilliant, essential piece of writing that treats the adoptee not as a pathology, but as the ultimate expert. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly important deep dive.
It has been a necessary conversation.
We'll leave you with this. The next time a sudden smell catches you off guard and transports you to a forgotten moment, take a second. Feel how completely your body believes it is back in that time. And then imagine what it must cost a person to spend their entire life desperately trying to build a firewall against a memory that powerful just to prove to the world that they belong. Until next time.